Good morning, U11s. Obviously, this morning was planned to give you an opportunity to kind of get first experience of what maybe we'll be experiencing when we come to the summer. This is an assembly we've done for a few years now, but has been impacted by COVID. So apologies. We would normally do this together as a group, but obviously at the moment we're unable to do that. This morning's an opportunity for me just to go through some key things to help you going forward with revision and planning, because some of you have found this morning quite difficult. And it isn't meant to be that. It's about us learning from the mistakes we might have made and still having the chance and the opportunity to do something about it now rather than worrying about it in the summer. Obviously, with my background, I think it's very important to understand that although revision is critical, we've got a booklet that will be given to you to show you how to revise the techniques, because I do think some people for the mocks find it quite challenging, especially what's gone on for the last couple of years where we haven't had as many exams or the structure that we would normally expect from our GCSEs. I mean, you guys coming in and still not knowing overly what's going to be on the papers come the summer, it's an opportunity for us to kind of go through different techniques that maybe they weren't used. Now, health and well-being is obviously something that's talked about often, but there's a huge benefit to looking after yourself properly in the build-up before the exam. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the key things that will hopefully eradicate or improve some of the things below. And these are things that we all can do, and we will have an impact, and we can actually do things that will make it better for us. So the first one is obviously physical health. Now, it is important to understand that physical activity does support you going forward. There is a benefit to activity, and it is important that when you run up to your exams or the run up to the stresses that are going to come up, that you do continue taking part in physical activity. It might be going for a walk, it might be going to play football with your friends, it could be anything. This also links into relaxation, which we'll come to later in it. But it does show that it does boost your memory, it improves your concentration levels, does help reduce stress, and lengthens the attention span. Now, as for someone that was encouraged not to when I was doing my exams, my parents thought I had to do my exams only. It actually made it more difficult for me to be able to focus and took away something that I enjoyed doing. Now, physical activity can be anything. It can go for the gym, it can go for a walk, like I've said. Now, it's important, even if you don't feel like you need to do that, there is a proven benefit that will show why doing physical activity, it actually stimulates the brain more so. So what happens is you can see these two pictures here, with the picture to the left of sitting for 20 minutes. The brain scan identifies blue areas of least activity, whereas the diagram to the right-hand side shows that after 20 minutes of walking, actually the brain is working better than it would be if you were sitting down. And this means that when you're doing your revision and you feel that at the time maybe watching TV, that doesn't count as physical activity. Moving around and doing is better, especially when you're going through days where you're revising at the weekend. Nutrition. Now, it is proven that someone with a healthy, balanced diet is less likely to be stressed. There's been a lot of work done in the last 10, 15 years on what foods we should and shouldn't eat and how we should hydrate ourselves. It was a bugbear of mine with my children, probably your parents as well, seeing the foods that we're eating on the way in, fizzy drinks, the sugary snacks, the things that we're consuming before we walk into exam. And it's proven this actually can have a detrimental impact on our results. First thing in the morning, breakfast is essential. A lot of students feel that they don't eat breakfast, especially with your exams you're going to have early in the morning. It's critical that we make sure that we have something to eat beforehand. Again, these are trying to reduce your kind of cereals that have high sugar content. These are things that will have something called long-lasting energy, which we'll come to shortly about how that can benefit you. It's important also you feed yourself, because all the food that you're eating is consumed and will develop energy, which helps the brain focus for longer periods of time. So as you can see from the quote to the side, not only are we talking about food, we're also talking about hydrating. Now, hydrating is essential because we still have a number of students that will still use energy drinks to keep themselves going, and caffeine is a stimulant, which again does impact our concentration levels. So, as I said previously, hydration, we know we're encouraged to drink about 2 litres of water a day. And you think in context about how much you are actually drinking, you're probably finding you're not getting anywhere close to those 2 litres. 2 litres is actually a bit of a myth. It's actually required that you should be drinking more, because obviously 2 litres is somewhere not really being active. You as a student are normally walking into school, you're active, you're playing football, you're playing sports, or you're running around. There's a reason why you should be looking to consume about 3 litres. Not only does it impact your concentration, it also impacts your wellness. It makes you feel better. Most of the time, when you feel quench of thirst, that is the first stage of dehydration. And it's important that you start bringing a water bottle in, because in the exams, again, we're expecting you and wanting you to bring water in, because it will help for those longer exams. Now, what we've got here is we've got something called macronutrients. These are the 3 main components of what we call a healthy diet. Now, there is some benefit to each one of these. When you look at fats, people think they're scared off by them. The fats actually produce more energy than carbs do. And there are certain good fats and certain bad fats. But having a balanced diet where we're eating our fruits and vegetables, where we're making sure we have protein and carbs and fats is key. You don't want to be in a position when you're going into the exam process where you start cutting out important foods because you're worried about what the impact they're going to have on you. It's also important that you don't have a diet dominated by one of these kind of like macronutrients, because also there's a negative to that. It can involve you being tired and being sluggish as well. So again, it's essential. You look at these definitions, think about what we're consuming. Now, this is something that's quite important, because this is the point I'm making when in regard to what we talk about sugary drinks. When what can actually happen, our blood sugar levels, we peak very, very quickly with certain foods. Now, so the red graph at the top identifies a number of different things that you can eat that will give you a buzz straight away. Now, not typically things like in sports context, we would normally eat before football's gone out. It used to be they'd give you Jaffa cakes, jelly babies, high sugar content, but they've actually proven now it impacts your concentration even as a sportsman. They actually don't want you to do that anymore. They actually try to have long-lasting impacts, which is the green line. Because what it'll show you is over a long period of time, your energy levels will not dip massively where you feel like you've got a low. It'll actually generally keep you with a maintained level of energy that will let you get through an exam. So what kind of foods we eat for breakfast, what foods we eat for lunch are important when we're going to an exam. Don't fall for the trick of getting a Red Bull or an energy drink thinking that's going to help you. It will actually hinder you and make it harder for you to concentrate. Sleep, rest, and recovery, probably one that obviously is a bit of a bugbear of parents asking to get up in the morning. It's proven that at your age, you do require more rest and more sleep. And it's something that it needs to be considered quite often. And what you need to think about is at the moment, and especially exam season before Christmas, how are you actually resting and how are you relaxing? Okay. We need to think quite carefully about how you recharge your batteries. Being obsessed with the exams and being focused only on those isn't healthy for anyone. And it's something we need to consider. Now, this presentation is actually going to be shared also with your parents to explain this. That there's, again, it's proven that by just doing exams only, it can have, or focusing only on revision all the time, it can have, again, a detrimental impact. You need to start thinking about what you do. Now, relaxing and resting and having downtime is important, but it's the way you do it. And sometimes, again, we can get caught into social media and TVs and computer games. Again, coming off those, going back into a revision kind of process can have an impact. Now, if you rest appropriately, and again, you go to bed at a good time rather than going to bed at 1 or 2 in the morning and get up at midday, that can have a bad impact as well. But if you go to bed and you get a significant amount of hours sleep, these are the things that can actually help us. The most is at the moment expected to be in school for 8:35. When I talk to students, generally they say they get up between 7 and 7:15. So you're basically thinking as an adult, you should be going to bed between 10:30 and 11 o'clock. That gives you the adequate amount of time to get yourself up, ready to be able to focus on what you're doing the following day. Now, often what happens is we're expected when we're revising to revise in intervals. And what again happens, and we've discussed with a lot of students about retrieval being the most important thing in the beginning of an interval, but also realizing that you can't just revise solidly for hours on end. Your brain hasn't got the ability to take on board the information for that period of time. You need to break it down to smaller chunks, but in between those chunks, giving yourself the chance to rest. Your brain will only work for a certain period of time and it needs to do different activities. So if you're doing 20 minutes of retrieval work, you stop, you then do 20 minutes of exam questions, you might stop, you might reflect on the answers and go back and make some notes. Once that 60 minutes is up, you need to go for a walk. You need to do something completely different, take your mind off it. When you come back to the table, again, you might then work onto another activity and you might work around the day like that. But your brain will get tired. And the longer you do that, by the end of the day, and this is where a lot of people say to me, do I work better at the end of the day? It's impossible after a long day. your brain works better in the morning, but it also works better with breaks to allow it to focus and recharge itself. Sleep deprivation is something that some of us probably discussing here probably experienced it. I've experienced it when my children were born, and it's something that I struggled massively with. When you'd come into work and you only getting 2 or 3 hours sleep, and most of the time it's down to stress and it's down to the kids crying. It's important that you try to set up a regular routine, that you go to bed at a time and you get up at a time. This does help. If you break that routine at the weekend and then go back to having 12, 14 hours sleep, it will impact you at the beginning of the week, and it doesn't help. It's also important to realize that sometimes you have to make sure that you look at what you're doing before you go to bed, and we'll come to that shortly, because the idea of drinking certain drinks and taking on board iPhones and bits and pieces before you go to bed will again have a negative impact. Now, these are things that actually happen if you don't get enough sleep. And you can see on the left-hand side, these are things that we all want to avoid. These are things that walking into that first GCSE exam, if you haven't got the right decision-making skills, if you can't remember, if you can't concentrate for the exam, this could be the difference between you getting your grade to go on and do what you want to do at sixth form or college, or the difference between not achieving it. And it's heartbreaking to think that it could be 2 or 3 marks that does this. But these are things that you could adjust before you walk into exams to give you the chance to do that. So these are the things that we're saying that you should be trying to do before you go to sleep. So you're looking at making sure you come off any technology an hour beforehand. You're not drinking any sugary drinks or caffeine. Caffeine for 6 hours, that's fairly excessive. Most people don't drink caffeine, but what we've got is sugary drinks that you have not before 3 hours go to bed. And obviously things like eating and sleeping and studying. It's not healthy to study right up to the second you go to sleep. You'll find that if you do these kind of things, you'll get up in the morning and you'll feel more refreshed and better for the next day. So these are some of the tips we've got to help you with your hydration, your activity, your nutrition, your lifestyle, to allow you to have the best opportunity to be successful when your exams come forward. Like I said, this PowerPoint will be shared, so you've got an opportunity to go through this and look at it again. If there's anything in here you think might be able to help. Now, I'm assuming that when you think of exams, and I was exactly the same, I'm not going to pretend that I enjoyed these either. I was anxious because there was a lot of pressure put on my exams when I was younger, because there was pressure put on my parents, expectations, certain grades. And I did struggle, and I did find it really, really hard. And I think it's underestimated now as a parent with my children come forward, that as long as my children are trying, and I know they've revised and they've given it a go, I'll be proud of what they achieve. But sometimes you can put yourself under necessary pressure yourself because of the expectation for the next stage. I've mentioned in this assembly already, and it's not really helping, about the extra mark could be the difference between a 5 and a 6. It's important to think about these kind of key words and what we can do to be able to help you. Now, stress is something that's good. Having good stress is important, but there is something called a peak, that when stress becomes too much, you see the right hand side of the graph where you get exhaustion, you get burnout, and you actually get breakdowns. When you hear people having kind of panic attacks, or you hear people saying they can't deal with the stress anymore, they're working that in there. If the exam's too easy and you're too laid back, you also won't work well. You're trying to find that peak flow in the middle. You're trying to get to that stage where, yes, you know there's exams coming up, but you're prepared, you're ready, you're eating well, you're sleeping well, you've done your work, and you're walking into that exam ready to go. Now, sometimes we've had people that have currently gone into the exams and found it very, very stressful. And there are some strategies to help you when you're walking in and reassessing. And this happens when vividly going in doing a question, like that first question you have in the paper, when it's not the question you know. And sometimes you can lose your head and kind of drop out the game. There are certain ways to get yourself back in. And you need to think about, again, the difference between just settling down, refocusing, moving on to the next question and coming back, or taking a deep breath, or counting to 5 or 6 in your head, and just stepping back and realizing that you can do this could again be the difference to you getting those grades that you need. Talked already about social media. Obviously, I think it's a massive concern at the moment, that how many of us are obsessed with our phones and need to be on our phones at all times. It is a problem, and it's something that will be addressed in later years when they do research on us, that we find that we're now becoming obsessed. I'm the same. I was saying to my wife last night, we're watching a Italian gangster program on Sky Atlantic at the moment, but it's subtitles. It's great. You can't be on your phone because you haven't got a clue what you're watching. But it means we have to put phones down. But 9 times out of 10, you're on your phone while you're watching a film. It's not healthy. We need to learn how we can put our phones away. They can be helpful in revision. They've got some great apps, but separating yourself for a period of time will help you in the long run. So try and think about the things that you can do to look after your health. These are kind of key elements that if you put these plans in place, I honestly believe these are the impacts that will help you get the grades that you deserve moving forward. Last one, you've probably seen this iceberg on the right hand side loads of times. It's important to think about the questions on the left. No one wants to go into an exam not ready. Most people pretend and laugh and joke outside because they're nervous or they didn't know how to revise or where to start. The purpose of today is an opportunity for you to tell us what we need to do to help you. We're here to make sure you get the grades you want, to give you the best opportunity. I've told you 1,000 times before, the worst feeling in the world is exams day for that person that we haven't helped. We want to make sure you're all successful. The iceberg, you only see the top, but you don't see all the hard work people put in below. You're going to feel disappointed potentially today. You're going to feel that you haven't done enough. But now is the time to feel that way. You still have an opportunity to be successful and move on. Okay, you need to start reassessing. We've provided you your reflection documents. I'd hope you've taken those seriously because those documents are important to me because it sees what I can do as a head teacher to give you the best chance to be successful. But make sure that you take something away from today, even if it's one thing, that small marginal gain from now to next week, and you take something else in the following week, could be the difference in you going on and being successful when you go forward. Thank you so much for listening. I know there's some other bits and pieces that are highlighted for the rest of the session. We will be in touch to go for anything else and go with the interventions. There are bits and pieces moving forward. But thank you for listening and have a great rest of the day. See you soon.